So, my friend, Bishop Maximus, it is so good to have you here in Rome as part of the Philosophical Silk Road. As you know, you very much provoked this project in a deep way. We were at ETNA together, and you took me aside uh, and in a very friendly way, but firm, you said, John, I don't think you should talk anymore about the religion that's not a religion. But this thing about the philosophical Silk Road, I think that's really good. I think that's really good. And I've come to be very critical of my previous proposal of the religion that's not a religion, because it's very much the Enlightenment engineering attitude towards the sacred, which I think is a fundamental performative contradiction. Your relationship to it is directly counter to what you claim it to be. And then that really gave birth to the philosophical Silk Road. So I always wanted you invited. Then we were talking, and you proposed, because you were going to go to Alexandria and do colloquium on Clement, and you said, John, Clement of Alexandria should be in the philosophical Silk Road. He's the first person to really bring Christianity and Greek philosophy together, and we were planning on going to Alexandria, but it became apparent that that would not be safe, and so we diverted to Rome.
The Egyptian government would not allow us to film.
Yeah, yes. So, first of all, I want to express gratitude for your presence, for your inspiration for this project, for your support of it, for your flexibility, and all very much appreciated. I've been looking forward to this for quite a bit. And you've asked to basically be given an opportunity to prepare a talk you were actually thinking of presenting at the colloquium. And I thought, as a way of introducing Clement and getting us into uh, perhaps a little bit more like the epistemological and philosophical aspects of his work and how that might be relevant to the philosophical Silk Road. So first of all, thank you and welcome.
Well, thank you very much, John, and it is both an honor and an extraordinary pleasure to be here, both together with you and here in the city of Rome, which was the capital of the world for so many years,
Yeah.
and which is a place in which there is so much history, both philosophical and particularly theological. The talk that I've prepared of Clement of Alexandria is for a colloquium that we are holding at St. Photios Orthodox Theological Seminary. But I wanted to do it together with you because it fits into the theme of the philosophical Silk Road, and particularly the question of the relationship between ancient Greek philosophy and Christian theology.
Yes.
And Clement of Alexandria was really the first Christian thinker to start the synthesis of ancient Greek philosophy and Christian theology. And so he's a really good starting point from my point of view. And he's also one of the church fathers, if we can call him that. His status is a little debated. But he's one of the church fathers or church thinkers who deals in a very explicit way with the question of epistemology in ways that are relevant to our modern epistemological concerns. So I'm going to read this prepared talk that I have, which deals with epistemology understood in the context of faith or as faith. And I think that this will allow us to springboard into broader discussions of the relationship between philosophy and theology.
Great. So we talked about this, and you said you would like to do it conference style. So I will wait till you are finished to ask you questions, but I do not trust my working memory to hold all the questions that might come to mind. So I'm not being rude. I am going to be just noting down some ideas or points for discussion when you're done.
Please do, and I apologize if this may be a little long.
That's all right. I look forward to it.
All right. So Clement of Alexandria, Faith and Knowledge. Part 1, Faith as Presupposition. So the question of epistemology, in other words, what we can know, how we can know it, and how we can know that we can know it, or what we can know, has been at the center of modern philosophy since Descartes, at least. and most modern philosophers have been rather skeptical about human knowledge. Ancient philosophy, however, tended to be more confident that we can have true knowledge and that we can use it towards constructive or even transcendent ends. And Christian thinkers in antiquity mostly took for granted this confidence, this epistemological confidence, which is also in accordance with Christian doctrine, which is the reason why they wrote very little about these foundational epistemological ideas. However, these questions are at the forefront of modern concerns. And modern philosophers have made Christian faith and the notion of the supernatural in general one of the targets of their skepticism. And really, Christianity has been slow to address these questions adequately. And I think that part of the reason for this is that they were not discussed in length or at length during the formative periods of Christian doctrine in antiquity. But there is one ancient Christian writer who does lay out a coherent theory of epistemology, and it's one that anticipates and even refutes many of the modern arguments for the various forms of skepticism. And that author is Clement of Alexandria. Clement was the head of the catechetical school of Alexandria at the end of the 2nd century, the beginning of the 3rd century. And he's one of the church fathers or church writers who's most responsible for initiating this transfiguration of ancient Greek philosophy into a vehicle that's adequate or apt for the expression of Christian doctrine, Christian theology. The core of Clement's argument for Christian epistemology is that all knowledge is based on faith, and that this faith is ultimately the same faith as that faith by which we believe in God, by which we believe in Jesus Christ. Clement begins his argument by noting that all of our thinking and our reasoning and our science is based on presuppositions, which themselves are indemonstrable. So he says, either all things require a demonstration, or some of them are self-evident. But if the first, by demanding the demonstration of the demonstration, we shall go on ad infinitum. And so demonstration is subverted. But if the second, those things which are self-evident will become the starting points of demonstration. In point of fact, the philosophers, in other words, the Greek philosophers, admit that the first principles of all things are indemonstrable. So that if there is demonstration at all, there is an absolute necessity that there be something self-evident, which is called primary and indemonstrable. Consequently, all demonstration is traced up to indemonstrable faith. Now, the idea that our fundamental axioms are indemonstrable was developed by Aristotle, and it's one of the main theories of epistemology. It's the school called foundationalism in epistemology. But Clement puts it in an entirely new context by showing that our assent to our presuppositions is actually a form of faith. Modern skepticism finds one of its most paradigmatic expressions in the works of David Hume. And in order to show how Clement's epistemology can be used in addressing modern issues, modern concerns, we will present Clement's arguments in the context of Hume's famous problem of induction. So this is a kind of a case study that we'll do. And in this problem, Hume shows that the validity of induction cannot be rationally demonstrated. For any attempt to prove it assumes the conclusion, and it's thus circular. Since nearly all thinking is based on induction, this problem calls into question the legitimacy of any sort of rational explanation of anything. And many prominent thinkers have attempted to solve the problem with much creativity and scant success, maybe because they were unaware of Clement. So let us accept, for the sake of brevity, and in the company of most philosophers, that Hume's problem of induction is intractable on its own terms. So the question we are faced with then is, Given that it is rationally indemonstrable, how do we justify our acting as if induction is true, which we do at every moment of our lives? A common sense response to the problem of induction, and in general to indemonstrable first principles, is that we cannot live or think or function in any way if we do not assume their truth, which is fair enough, um, but that's a kind of a negative argument, and it doesn't answer the question of what is the formal mechanism by which we accept them. Can there be a positive justification? And what are the consequences of that justification, whatever it might be, for the rest of our thinking about the world? This is relevant because the reasons for which we accept foundational principles will surely affect the way that we think about reality in general and our place in it. Because if such reasoning can be accepted with regard to the most fundamental issues, it's no stretch to suppose that it might be applied to more broadly to issues that are sequent to those. In any event, Hume proposes a skeptical and what we can call a practical approach to philosophical reasoning. And he answers that we act as if induction and causality and the rest are true due to custom or habit. And so he explains here, this is a quote from Hume, when we are inclined to behave or to think in some way, not because it can be justified by reasoning or some process of the understanding, but because we have behaved or thought like that so often in the past, we always say that this inclination is the effect of custom. And using that word, we don't claim to give the basic reason for the inclination. All we are doing is to point out a fundamental feature of human nature, which everyone agrees is there and which is well known by its effects. Perhaps that is as far as we can go. Perhaps, that is, we can't discover the cause of this cause, and must rest content with it as the deepest we can go in explaining our conclusions from experience. Our ability to go that far should satisfy us. If our faculties won't take us any further, we ought not complain about this. That's Hume's view. Now, to state that we act upon induction based on custom or habit does nothing to explain why we do so. It's no more than a trivial declaration of the necessary conditions for our actions. And Hume's skepticism here is really less of a humble confession of human limitations than, in my view, an ignoble retreat from the philosopher's duty to investigate and understand. Now, while Clement cannot demonstrate induction or first principles any more than Hume, because it's impossible, as Hume demonstrated well, he does provide a more detailed justification. And what's more important, he can show the coherence of our justification vis-a-vis the rest of our experience with reality. So the classical Aristotelian believes that the intellect possesses an innate power to recognize natures which act in predictable ways. And this may be true, but it does not address Hume's contention, which is not that induction doesn't work in practice, but that it cannot be demonstrated logically. Appealing to the power of the intellect to recognize natures and principles merely pushes the argument back a step to those principles and to the nature of the intellect.
Exactly.
And Hume differs from Aristotle here, not in acknowledging that first principles are indemonstrable, nor that they are recognized from experience, but in why experience should serve as an explanation for belief. Hume claims that it's simply so, just is. And we cannot know more about the matter, we cannot draw conclusions from it, we should just live life based on custom. But Clement of Alexandria, along with other fathers of the Church, offers us a deeper explanation. He acknowledges with Aristotle that the intellect is something like a divine faculty, or it's capable of divine illumination, however that may be interpreted, that it possesses the ability to recognize natures which are external to it, and thus bridge the gap between experience and reason. But he explains in greater detail the activity of the intellect, or rather by what kind of act the intellect justifies its apprehension of indemonstrable first principles.
Mm-hmm.
That act is precisely the act of faith. So Clement explains the process as follows. Faith, he says, is a preconception of the mind, and the preconception is a grasping at something evident and at the clear understanding of a thing. And without preconception, no one can either inquire or doubt or judge or even argue. How can one, without a preconceived idea of what he is aiming after, learn about that which is the subject of his investigation? And he who has learned has already turned his preconception into comprehension. And if he who learns not without a preconceived idea, in other words, with a preconceived idea, which takes in what is expressed, that man has ears to hear the truth. And happy is the man that speaks to the ears of those who hear, as happy certainly also is he who is a child of obedience. Now to hear is to understand. If then faith is nothing else than a preconception of the mind in regard to what is the subject of discourse, and obedience is so called an understanding and persuasion, no one shall learn anything without faith, since no one learns anything without preconception. Consequently, there is a more ample demonstration of the complete truth of the words that spoken by the prophet. Unless you believe, neither will you understand. From Holy Scripture. So Clement continues. Now he's starting to prepare the way for the religious connection. Hope, too, is based on faith. Accordingly, faith is the assent of the soul to any of those things that do not affect the senses through not being present. Hope is the expectation of the possession of good. Necessarily, then, expectation is founded on faith. He who is faithful keeps inviolably what is entrusted to him, and we are entrusted with the utterances respecting God and the divine words, the commands along with the execution of the injunctions. This is the faithful servant who is praised by the Lord. And when it is said God is faithful, it is intimated that he is worthy to be believed when declaring anything. Now his word declares, and God himself is faithful. How then, if to believe is to suppose, do the philosophers think that what proceeds from themselves is sure? For voluntary assent to a preceding demonstration is not a supposition, but is assent to something sure. And who is more powerful than God? Or we may say, who is more sure than God? In other words, God being the most sure thing by definition, if he is understood as the basis of all of our assent and preconceptions, establishes our subsequent chain of thinking upon the most solid foundation conceivable. This isn't the ontological argument, but because it's not understood as necessary, but it's understood here as something positive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Unbelief is the feeble negative supposition of one opposed to him, as incredulity is a condition which admits faith with difficulty. Faith is the voluntary supposition and anticipation of pre-comprehension. Expectation is an opinion about the future, and expectation about other things is opinion about uncertainty. In other words, about uncertain things.
Mm-hmm.
Confidence is a strong judgment about a thing. Therefore, we believe him in whom we have confidence unto divine glory and salvation, and we confide in him who is God alone, whom we know that these things nobly promised to us, and for this end benevolently created and bestowed by him on us, will not fail. So, part 2, faith as intentionality and moral judgment. How does this faith, which is clearly religious in context, differ from mere belief? And what more and on what grounds is Clement claiming than Hume's claim that we believe in the validity of induction based on habit?
Mm-hmm.
Hume naively assumes that humans will automatically believe what nature habitually presents to them. His definition of belief is minimalistic. Belief, Hume says, is nothing more but a vivid, lively, forcible, firm, steady conception of an object than any that the unaided imagination could ever attain.
Yeah.
He makes no mention of the assent of the mind, nor of any action at all on the part of the one who believes. For Hume, belief simply happens to a person as a result of external factors. Hume therefore proposes that we have no reason whatsoever to believe that induction or causality is true, but that repeated experience produces, irrespective of our will, a firm conception that it is so.
Mhm.
This rather spare and depressing picture was in fact shared by certain heretics in antiquity. As Clement notes, he says the followers of Basilides, that was an ancient Gnostic heresy, regard faith as natural, in other words, necessary, for as they also refer it to choice, representing it as finding ideas by intellectual comprehension without demonstration. While the followers of Valentinus, that was another Gnostic group, these are ancient heretics, assign faith to us, the simple, us being the Christian church, but will have it that knowledge springs up of their own selves, who are saved by nature, from the advantage of a germ of superior excellence. This is the elitist part of Gnosticism, saying that it is as far removed from faith as the spiritual is from the animal. So the Gnostics placed knowledge over faith, and they said faith is for simple, ignorant people, and we, the intelligent, better people, have knowledge. Further, the followers of Basilides say that faith, as well as choice, is proper according to every interval, and that in consequence of the supramundane selection of themselves, the elect, mundane faith accompanies all nature, and that the free gift of faith is conformable to the hope of each. Faith, then, is no longer the direct result of free choice, if it is a natural advantage. So in other words, if we automatically believe simply by the circumstances, then there's no choice involved. Now, Clement's notion of faith stands in sharp contrast to this deterministic version of mental conception. His understanding of faith is rooted principally in free will and moral striving. We must believe that first principles are true in order to think. And this belief involves not merely the passive reception of nature and the conditions that are presented to us, but also our active assent, especially if we should choose to examine the matter. Wherever there is assent, there is choice, and there is a will to make that choice. And where there is choice and a will, there is a value judgment. And where there is a value judgment, there is a moral question. So from the beginning, our relationship to logic and reason must involve at least a moral sensibility. Faith is also a more robust notion than mere belief. Belief is classically defined as assent to a proposition. But faith may be more amply conceived of as belief which is active in life, and which makes present to us, it makes real to us greater realities than those immediately perceived by the senses. And Clement explains here, faith, which the Greeks disparage, in other words, the Greek philosophers, deeming it futile and barbarous, is a voluntary preconception. We should note that this is very similar to modern day philosophers who look down on faith as mere belief in some ridiculous fairy tale for the common people.
Mm-hmm.
Faith is a voluntary preconception, the assent of piety, the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen, according to the divine apostle. That's St. Paul in the Epistle to the Hebrews. For hereby preeminently the elders obtained a good report, but without faith it is impossible to please God. Others have defined faith to be a uniting assent to an unseen object, as certainly the proof of an unknown thing is evident assent. If then it be choice, being desirous of something, the desire is in this instance intellectual. And since choice is the beginning of action, faith is discovered to be the beginning of action, being the foundation of rational choice in the case of anyone who exhibits to himself the previous demonstration through faith. And voluntarily to follow what is useful is the first principle of understanding. This is, we might think of this as the proper use of pragmatism.
Mm-hmm.
Voluntarily to follow what is useful is the first principle of understanding. Unswerving choice, then, gives considerable momentum in the direction of knowledge. The exercise of faith directly becomes knowledge reposing on a sure foundation. And then Clement continues, expanding on the voluntary and the moral aspects of faith and explicitly contradicting Hume. He says not only the Platonists, but the Stoics also say that assent is in our own power. All opinion and judgment and supposition and knowledge by which we live in a perpetual intercourse with the human race is an assent, which is nothing else than faith. And unbelief, being defection from faith, shows both assent and faith to be possessed of power. If you consider the truth, you will find that a man can be naturally misled so as to give assent to what is false, even though he possesses the recourses necessary to believe in the truth. Now, if faith follows necessarily upon circumstances, in other words, it's deterministic, the person, he who has not believed, not being the author of his unbelief, will not meet with a due recompense, because he that has believed is not the cause of his belief. And so the entire peculiarity and difference of belief and unbelief will not fall either under praise or censure, if we reflect rightly, since there attaches to it the antecedent natural necessity, proceeding from the Almighty, here in the case of those who make this a divine predestination. And if we are pulled like inanimate things by the puppet strings of natural powers, willingness and unwillingness and impulse, which is the antecedent of both, are mere redundancies. For my part, I am utterly incapable of conceiving such an animal as has its appetencies, desires, which are moved by external causes under the dominion of necessity. What place is there any longer for repentance of him who is once an unbeliever, which comes through which comes forgiveness of sins, so that neither is baptism rational, nor the blessed seal, the chrismation, nor the Son, nor the Father, but God, as I think, turns out to be the distribution to men of natural powers, which does not have voluntary faith as the foundation of salvation. So this view, this deterministic view, essentially makes God part of the world and simply the nature of necessity of the functioning of the world. Accordingly, faith may not, with any more with reason, be disparaged in an offhand way as simple and vulgar, belonging to anyone. For if it were a mere human habit, as the Greeks supposed, it would have been extinguished. But if it grows, and there is no place where it is not, then I affirm that faith, whether founded in love or in fear, as its disparagers assert, this is the common attack on religion that we scare people into believing, it's something divine, which is neither rent asunder by any mundane friendship, nor dissolved by the presence of fear. For love, on account of its friendly alliance with faith, makes men believers. And faith, which is the foundation of love, in its turn introduces the doing of good. Therefore, volition takes the precedence of all, for the intellectual powers are ministers of the will. Will, it is said, and you shall be able. And the Christian who has true knowledge, the real Gnostic, for him will and judgment and exertion are identical. For if the determinations are the same, the opinions and judgments will be the same too, so that both his words and life and conduct are conformable to rule. And the right heart seeks knowledge and hears it. God taught me wisdom, and I knew the knowledge of the holy. Again, quoting Holy Scripture. Faith, as described in the scriptural and the patristic testimony, which is outlined here by Clement, is therefore a moral choice to accept as true that which cannot be rationally demonstrated, but which, when believed and acted upon, makes possible the full experience of reality. And faith, thus understood, is an immeasurably superior justification for acting as if induction is true than mere custom, habit, or repeated experience. We must act as if induction is true in order to have any rational thought. But if we conceive of this as faith, and know it is no mere bowing to the inevitable, but it is a profound, meaningful, and coherent connection to every level of reality. Clement, in fact, affirms that this faith elevates the soul of the person who pursues it. He says that faith, therefore, and the knowledge of the truth render the soul, which makes them its choice, always uniform and equable. For congenial to the man of falsehood is shifting and change and turning away. But to the true Christian of knowledge are calmness, rest, and peace. Part 3. Faith as transcendence and revelation. Clement does not envision faith merely as an escape route for epistemological justification.
I like that.
He views it as a transformative act that progressively reveals ever higher levels of reality. He says that there are body and soul, the five senses, speech, the power of reproduction. There's the intellectual or the spiritual faculty, whatever you choose to call it, the nous. And we must, in a word, ascending above all the others, stop at the mind. As the mind ascends from material realities to abstract realities, it senses that there are yet others that lie beyond, and which are connected to the fact that we cannot understand the ultimate principles of reality through reason or demonstration. The very fact that we must have faith, and that faith is an uplifting and a manifesting power of something beyond reason, leads us into those aspects of reality that lie beyond the powers of sense perception and rational demonstration. And we often experience a hint of this maybe through the experience of love, or what some might call the flow state, or different other states of consciousness. And here we begin dimly to perceive something like the spiritual world, something beyond. Because faith, in the sense that Clement has thus far laid it out, is fundamentally religious. And it does not differ in kind from explicit belief and revelation. The whole thrust of his argument, the fact that only by faith can we operate in the world, indicates that the structure of reality both surpasses materiality and rationality, and that it is profoundly and integrally moral in character. When we further examine reality, and we realize that the good must have ontological primacy, or nothing would exist, and that the whole nature of reality is relational and even personal, for morality has no meaning outside of personhood, then we can understand why it is that the universal expectation and experience of humans is that the good will reach towards us as we reach towards it. And this reaching towards us of this necessary, this ontological good, is what we can call revelation. And it's in the context of accepting revelation that we most commonly employ the word faith. But Clement has shown us that our interaction with all the aspects of reality is characterized by faith. And the connection of our faith to the revelation of the good is therefore eminently reasonable and even to be expected, because the process by which we ascend in our levels of faith to interact with the levels of reality is characterized, or at least it's potentiated by, our advancement in virtue. So Clement explains, love, on account of its friendly alliance with faith, makes men believers. And faith, which is the foundation of love, in its turn, introduces the doing of good, since fear, the pedagogue of the law, is believed to be fear by those by whom it is believed. If its existence is shown in its working, it is yet believed when about to do and threatening, and when not working and present. And being believed to exist, it does not itself generate faith, but is by faith tested and proved trustworthy. Such a change, then, from unbelief to faith, and to trust in hope and fear, is divine. And in truth, faith is discovered by us to be the first movement towards salvation, after which fear and hope and repentance, advancing in company with temperance and patience, leads us to love and knowledge. Rightly, therefore, the Apostle Barnabas says, "From the portion I have received, I have done my diligence to send little by little to you, that along with your faith you may also have perfect knowledge." Fear and patience, then, are helpers of your faith, and our allies are long-suffering and temperance. These, then, he says, in what respects the Lord, continuing in purity, rejoice along with them with wisdom, understanding, intelligence, and knowledge. The aforementioned virtues are then the elements of knowledge. The result is that faith is more elementary, as being necessary to the Christian who knows, just as respiration to him that lives in this world is to life. Just as without the four elements it's impossible to live, so neither can knowledge be attained without faith. It is then the support of truth. Part 4. Faith as recursion. There are therefore levels of faith, which correspond to levels of being, and each one builds on the previous ones. We have faith in our intentionality, in other words, in our consciousness of the existence of ourselves and of the external world.
Mm-hmm.
We have faith in our awareness, in our intentionality with respect to individuals. We believe that concrete things exist. We have faith in our awareness of the existence of natures and essences, believing that abstract entities or categories are real. That's how we are able to think. We have faith in our awareness of our intent towards value judgments, and thus we believe that moral truths exist. We have faith in the awareness of our reason, believing that truth and logic are real relations, and that there is a correspondence between our thoughts and our expressions and the structure and the working of reality. We have faith in our awareness of meaning, and that we and the world are mutually fitted in such a way that we can know our true purposes, even the ultimate ones. We have faith in our awareness of this recursive and interexpressive nature of reality, and that we can manifest this recursion deliberately through the making of symbols. That's what symbols do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that this is a moral choice to affirm all of the aforementioned realities. This making of symbols also strengthens our belief and our connection with these realities, and allows us to use them to ascend to more complete, more perfect experiences of them. We have faith also in our awareness of transcendence, the possibility of transcendence, and that to the extent that we strive to do all of these things, we can participate more deeply, more truly in reality. And that, in fact, there is no limit to this deeper participation, which we participate in ways that continually open up to us new aspects of reality. We have faith in our awareness of revelation, that insofar as reality is good and interrelational and interpersonal, it reaches back to us. Or most especially, that which is most transcendent reaches back to us. The super transcendent reveals himself to us. Each of these levels cannot be demonstrated rationally or logically, but they must be believed in order to participate fully in them. Belief allows us to ascend and to partake of life and reality more completely, And this is why it is incumbent upon us to strive to make the moral effort that results in belief in each of these levels of reality becoming live options for us. So, so Clement says that Aristotle says that the judgment that follows knowledge is in truth faith. Accordingly, faith is something superior to knowledge and is its criterion. Conjecture, which is only a feeble supposition, counterfeits faith, as the flatterer counterfeits a friend and the wolf counterfeits a dog. As the workman sees that by learning certain things he becomes an artificer, and the helmsman, by being instructed in the art, will be able to steer, he does not regard the mere wishing to become excellent and good enough, but he must learn it by the exercise of obedience, the practice. To obey the word, whom we call instructor, is to believe him, going against him in nothing. For how can we take up a position of hostility to God? Knowledge, accordingly, is characterized by faith, and faith by a kind of divine mutual and reciprocal correspondence becomes characterized by knowledge. And here we can see how the practice of those things that appertain to faith makes us more fit to receive greater faith and those realities that faith makes present. So faith is a two-way street. It's a reciprocal exercise. The choice to believe is ours, and it's neither imposed nor is it impeded by external conditions in any absolute sense. But we can strengthen our faith, or we can strengthen our disposition to choose to believe by voluntarily altering our external conditions and our mental frameworks towards those practices, those conditions that are more conducive to the practice of faith. So Clement says, as playing at ball not only depends on one throwing the ball skillfully, but it requires, besides, for that one catch it dexterously, that the game may be gone through according to the rules for ball, so also is it the case that teaching is reliable when there is faith, when the faith on the part of those who hear, being, so to speak, a sort of natural art, contributes to the process of learning. So also the earth cooperates through its productive power, being fit for the sowing of the seed. For there is no good of the very best instruction without the exercise of the receptive faculty on the part of the learner, not even of prophecy, when there is the absence of docility or receptiveness on the part of those who hear. For dry twigs, being ready to receive the power of fire, are kindled with great ease. And the far-famed stone attracts steel through affinity, as the amber teardrop drags to itself twigs, and the lump sets chaff in motion. And the substances attracted obey them, influenced by a subtle spirit, not as a cause, but as a concurring cause. So everything is reciprocal. To bring this all to a conclusion, Hume's problem of induction poses to us, in the starkest terms possible, the opposing paths of, on the one hand, religious realism through faith, and on the other hand, skeptical nihilism based on a kind of psychologized materialism. Clement gives us an argument for a higher way. Ethics, faith, as opposed to involuntary belief, is a moral choice. Faith shows logic to rely on ethics. Faith allows for a real metaphysics via natures and causes. Faith fulfills religious yearning. Faith avoids the shallow materialism that confesses ignorance without a larger context. Faith gives to life meaning that is not arbitrary. Faith shows that human ignorance is bounded by transcendent mystery. Faith alone allows reason to be stable, logic to be categorizable, and the world to be intelligible. With faith, the limits of human reason point not to nonsense, but to something true and grand that is prior to and beyond reason. Faith affirms reality. It allows for science. It precludes relativism. Faith promotes virtue and encourages personal excellence. Faith makes the mysterious to be coherent and fulfilling. It makes insuperable difficulties to be tolerable, irreparable injustices to be bearable, and the imperfect world to be livable. Faith makes reality present, active, personal, and real for us. And it opens the door to that which infinitely transcends reality and is, in the end, our true home.
That was great.
Done.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Um, so I have a bunch of initial just connections.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Collingwood, uh, one of the great philosophers of aesthetics, wrote a book called Reason and Faith, where he makes a very similar argument.
All right.
And he also made the argument of metaphysics as
Mhm.
ultimately the study of presuppositions.
Mhm.
So Collingwood was actually doing a lot of work bringing the same themes
Mhm.
that you're bringing together. So you might find his work especially helpful to continue to
Come on,
develop.
please give me the
Yeah,
information on the
yeah.
book.
And because of that, and how I came to Collingwood, of course, is through my own work. So I'm going to start with something that might not sound like it's talking about what you're talking about, but it will very quickly get there. But in order to foreshadow where this is going, so you're not completely lost, you're talking about something. Your list at the end of all the things that are needed for logic, for being reasonable, for categorizing. I've made parallel and strong arguments for relevance realization also being necessary for categorization, communication, reason, inference, and that it cannot be established by inference or categorization.
Right.
So you can see, of
That
course,
is that is the limit of all arguments.
yes,
Everything ultimately goes to that point.
yeah, and in the recent paper we extended that argument a little bit, and so I'll touch there first because I think this bears, because I've been thinking about this directly around the notion, because of the philosophical Silk Road, of revelation, or I sometimes put it as the contrast between poetry and prophecy. But let me explain how I'm using those terms. But so that the formal argument in the paper which I sent you, the 2024 paper, first authors Johannes Jaeger, and then Alex Janovic and Anna Rydell, students of mine, and then myself, and then Dennis Walsh, who's a colleague of mine, a philosopher of biology. Anyway, the core of the argument goes like this. It depends on a foundational distinction within statistics between what's called a large world and a small world. So a small world is a world to which a formal system can be applied, because it is a world that has been constrained so that it only contains well-defined problems. All uncertainty has been converted into probabilistic risk, and there's clarity. There's nothing that is inherently ambiguous. And then, of course, the real world, or what Savage calls the large world, is typified by the opposite. It has ontological uncertainty, like radical uncertainty. It's radically ambiguous. It's combinatorially explosive. It possesses novelty, and it is pervaded by ill-defined problems.
That's very similar to what Clement was saying.
Yeah, exactly. This is why I'm bringing it. And then, so our argument was the process of relevance realization is the process of formalization, which is cutting off. This is a metaphor, so don't push me on it, but it's sort of sectioning off some of the large world and transmuting it into a usable small world.
Okay.
And then the argument is that process of formalization cannot itself be something that's generated by a formal system. Because in order for a formal system to work, you have to have a small world. And
Right. No system explains itself.
right, and the relevance realization, therefore, is ultimately not fundamentally computational in nature.
Makes sense.
Right. Now, as soon as you do that, you have, notice that this is both an epistemological and ontological argument for a vertical dimension. There's the small world, and then there's the large world. And there's two movements. There's a movement in which we might try and extend the small world more into the large world. And,
Yes, materialism.
or, well, I'm thinking about it in an operation. I'm thinking about more where people are trying to introduce new terms. And so it's poiesis in the sense of trying to make new terms, new ideas, new conceptual structures. And like when you move from perhaps a weaker logic to a stronger logic or something like that. But you also have to have movement where the large world is allowed to break into the small world and challenge its presupposition that it is self-sufficient. You know that I'm never offering a reductive account of anything. But to me, that aligns, I think, significantly with how you're presenting what Clement is talking about. And the point I'm making is revelation is necessary, because if this large world cannot periodically break into the small world, then the small world will fall prey to the bias that it is sufficient and will cease to be self-correcting in the face of the large world and thereby disconnect itself from reality. Does that make sense as an argument?
It makes sense, although I think that Clement is going a little beyond that.
No doubt, no doubt.
Because it's not simply that the large world is breaking into the small world, or that the large world is, I'd say, dictating the terms of the small world. It's the question of, given the inherent uncertainty with the large world, what really is the establishment of the large world? And that requires, in fact, even going out of the large world, in some sense.
I agree. So there's 2 points to that, and that's where I leave off of Savage's argument and move to the work of Michael Levin and some of the neo-Whiteheadians, which is the idea, like I said, forgive me, the metaphors are sort of
No, it's fine. We all use strange metaphors.
Yeah, so you're accessing and downloading. And then the idea is that this world can't be sort of random, but it can't be organized the way any small world is. Right? So it has to have an organization, and it has to have an organization that is somehow almost, I'll use like Aquinas' term, almost connatural. There has to be a shareable grammar between the organization of that and relevance realization. Because if relevance realization is reaching up and drawing down whenever it's formalizing, the large world has to have some structure to it so that the relevance realization is not random. Does that make sense?
That makes sense, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And then what you start asking is, okay, well, you know what this is sounding like, right? There's got to be sort of like a beyond formalization structure to possibility, and then what's the overall principle that unifies that? And you're getting into something very much like in the Neoplatonic worldview. So as you can see, I'm making, with this argument, I'm trying to make a deep dialogical connection between what I'm saying about relevance realization, what Clement is saying about revelation. And then that allows me to also to make a potential connection to faith. Now this one will take me a little bit longer because it literally was occurring to me as you were speaking, and it was really sparking me a lot. So part of me is hoping this will land for you. So one of the things that's been becoming more and more prevalent to me, and that's becoming more and more prominent to me as I'm on the pilgrimage of the philosophical Silk Road, is a convergence of a lot of separate arguments. The one I want to start with is from Frankfurt, and you recognize Frankfurt. And again, I also don't like to use this kind of language, but he does.
It has become a technical term.
Yeah, bullshit, and I think that's relevant for self-deception. But Frankfurt also talks about something, and in some senses at the other end. He talks about reasons for love, that reason needs love, and part of that's very analogous to how reason needs relevance realization. It needs to be oriented, it needs to aspectualize things, etc. But what he talks about is something really intriguing. He talks about love, and he coins a new term, new phrase. Talks about love as a voluntary necessity, which means, he says, it has this feature in that you feel like you can do no other, but you do not feel like you are enslaved in any way. So you feel simultaneously like you are choosing the beloved, and that you are, but that you can do nothing else than love the beloved. And it has this characteristics.
We might append to that. If you are to be true to yourself and to all the best that you know about your whole coherent experience of everything.
But that's exactly the point.
Otherwise, it would be a betrayal.
Yes, but that's the point. See, that he wants to indicate that there is the possibility of betrayal, and this is why it's not mere necessity.
Right.
Right?
Right.
But the thing he's trying to get to, and this is where it maps right into relevance realization. So I've made a whole bunch of arguments of which you are very familiar,
Hmm.
that relevance is neither algorithmically necessary nor is it merely arbitrary. It is between necessity and mere arbitrariness, right? And
Precisely.
right. And so what he's trying to get at by putting the voluntary and the necessity together is the kind of voluntary he's talking about is not impulsive arbitrariness, nor is it just mechanical necessity running through. John Searle makes a similar argument, unaware of Frankfurt, that this is how reason works. He said, if you're reading an argument, it is compelling but not compulsive,
Right.
right? So,
Yes.
right?
Very well phrased.
Yes. All right. So you have love and reason sharing this feature, beauty. I won't repeat the argument, but you can get the gist of it. Relevance,
Hmm.
realization, beauty, love, necessity, sense of moral obligation. Our sense of normativity is a
Hmm.
voluntary necessity, right? So the question I've been asking, well, there's two related questions I've been asking to people
Hmm.
along the philosophical Silk Road. What is one is they all seem to be around some core thing, this the voluntary necessity at the heart of, right, of relevance realization and love and reason and beauty and the flow state and moral obligation. And we also seem to, right, we seem to have a terrific confidence that these are the, I don't know what to call them, the entities that give us the greatest chance of connecting to what is most real.
Absolutely.
All right. And then the other question was, what does that mean about reality such that whatever this is, right, uh, fits to it? Okay?
Hmm.
I think you've given me the answer to the first question. I want to propose to you that faith is exactly the sense that can become the practice of voluntary necessity.
Yes.
It's at the heart of all of these: relevance, realization, reason, love, beauty, flow, normative obligation.
Yes.
Okay. And then, why is that disclosing? Like, why do we put faith in it? And by the way, I'll note that pragmatism and the arguments that people are usually offering for induction are pragmatist arguments, and pragmatism is just arguments about relevance, right?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
You're right.
Oh, which are not irrelevant arguments,
No.
incidentally.
This is my second point. Unlike James, who I think confuses them, we must keep truth and relevance distinct from each other because they are foundational opponent processes. We use truth to correct relevance, and we use relevance to correct
Right.
truth.
Which is why I think that Clement's way of approaching this, I think, harmonizes the main epistemological theories of foundationalism, coherentism, and pragmatism.
And
It
virtuous
puts
as
a-
and virtue
and
epistem.
virtue it puts them all together and shows how they all.
That's what I'm trying to do with this argument. That's
Right.
exactly what I'm trying to do with this argument.
Hmm.
Exactly what you're saying. And then, because there's something like this, we won't go down this side pathway. I'm just mentioning it to say, to give due credit,
Hmm.
because Spinoza has this very challenging claim that truth is its own standard,
Hmm.
right? That anything you'd use to try and establish truth requires a sense of truth, and therefore we have to have some sort of direct sense of truth.
Right.
And there's a lot of people that sort of, I think the problem is a lot of people are wrestling with this and they're trying to impose a representational theory, and that what Spinoza actually has is a conformity epistemology, a contact epistemology,
Hmm.
um,
I'll
which
take
bring,
your word for it.
yeah,
Hmm.
regardless of how that scholastic debate lands.
Hmm.
I want to say that even if I'm wrong, I want to give credit to Spinoza for inspiring this thought.
Okay, as long as we're giving credit to outside sources, I have to note that one of the quotes that Clement uses, he's actually quoting the Epicureans,
Yeah.
who normally are the enemy and who are the object of every form of abuse from all other philosophers, as being hedonists. But in this particular case, Clement cites Epicurus as being correct in his assertion of assent and the relationship of the mind to the acceptance of external reality.
So here's where some of my work, especially around ideas of reciprocal opening and other things, comes to bear on this. But this is the person that I used to understand this idea from Spinoza is Michael Polanyi, and then especially through the Christian epistemologist who proposes a covenantal epistemology, Esther Lightcap-Meek, in her really excellent book called Contact with Reality. And I had come up with this idea independent of Polanyi, but so it's convergent. But I do want to. He has precedence, so I'm giving him correct credit. So the idea is he's trying to get at what is the phenomenological sense of realness, and so this is what I'm trying. I'm trying to get something again back to the phenomenology. So the first idea is that real is a comparative. It's not like red. It's like tall. This is a point of Merleau-Ponty, but I think it's also in Plato. We can only judge something as illusory by comparing it to something real.
Right.
It's like tall. It's a comparative. Right? And so and of course this is the implicit thing behind the Neoplatonic argument, because what you do is that means there's an asymmetry in our judgment of realness until we move towards what is ultimately real. There's a completely independent argument, exactly the same structure at the heart of Vedanta. Same thing, same argument. So there's something very plausibly universal about this in terms of the phenomenology of the experience of realness.
Yes, and universality corroborates.
Yes. So here's the idea. When we are in right relationship, and notice that now gets us to virtue, we're in relationship of fittedness that you also made use of, right, in which we have this voluntary necessity. We start to, and I think this was coming through in the way Clement is describing it, we start to experience the world as we start to experience some aspect of the world as a fount of inexhaustible intelligibility, which then, by just the structure of the argument, moves us towards looking for the inexhaustible fount of intelligible realness that would make possible, right, the I don't want to say perfection, but the fulfillment of what our sense of voluntary necessity is looking for. What do you think about that?
I think that is a perfect argument, or perhaps if we cannot say perfect, we can say approaching perfection. I think that it harmonizes very beautifully with what Clement says, and that this is precisely the way that we understand faith in an active way, in a perhaps even in a seeking way, as you said, and oriented through multiple levels or aspects of reality towards what is the source.
Well, that recursion thing, that is right in, I mean, all the work I've been doing on predictive processing and relevance realization as inherently recursive. And there are always recursions in the levels of the agent and the arena, the agent and the arena. And this is now becoming, again, a very pervasive view.
And there are recursions within recursions.
Yes.
And this is where the importance of symbols comes in so strongly.
So let's, now that we've got sort of this moment of very pregnant convergence, I'm going to say, let's pause here and we'll pick it up around orientation and symbols for our next discussion.
Very good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.